Sure. Well, we should start with John Saxon because all things Saxon start with
Yes.
John. Uh, he was Air Force, uh, Army Air Corps. He was a career military officer. He had taught at Air Force Academy. When he retired to Norman, Oklahoma, and got a job teaching math at Oscar Rose Community College at the time. I think it's a 4-year school now, but it was a community college at the time. So here's an Air Force Academy instructor, professor teaching adults college algebra. And he was chagrined when he would give these fabulous lectures and the students on test day would forget what he taught them. So he thought, well, what if we just practiced the final exam every day for every assignment? And so he created a book that was published by Prentice Hall. Most people don't realize that, but he did create a community college textbook published by Prentice Hall and used it in his own classes at Oscar Rose Community College. And then he thought, why am I teaching these adults when I could be teaching high school freshmen college algebra or algebra? So that's when he launched on his Algebra 1 textbook. And he did that in about 1980. He refinanced his house. I think he went $80,000 into debt to get his book edited and published. And he was basically selling this Algebra 1 textbook out of the trunk of his car. I mean, he worked his publishing house. I mean, his home was his publishing house for many years. We visited probably in 1987, and his company was still in his house. And he had some employees that would just occupy different rooms of the house.
Wow.
So he was a one-man publisher until a Reader's Digest article about him broke. Trevor Armbruster wrote an article about him. John was just a skilled marketing person. You know, he just was able to grab the attention. He was a soldier always looking for a war, and he found one with the math establishment. So that was when he had to hire his first employee because his phone kept ringing and he couldn't get any work done. So that was the start of Saxon Publishers. It was actually Grassdale initially, and then he changed the name to Saxon Publishers. But my first book was published under the name Grassdale Publishers, which was later changed to Saxon Publishers. So back to my story, I'd been teaching math for 10 years in El Monte, California, which is more or less a blue collar community. And when I first started teaching math, I remember clearly my first couple of months of teaching math because I used the textbooks that were provided for us. And we went through the first unit and gave the test. The students did fine. Went through the second unit, gave the test, added some questions from the first unit. And of course, they hadn't heard anything. They couldn't remember anything from the first unit. And I knew instantly, this is not going to work. I'm not going to waste my time teaching them if they're not going to remember. So we just gathered up all the books, put them in the closet, closed the door, and I started writing my own assignments for students from that day on. And I did that for about 8 years. As a departmentalized 7th, 8th grade teacher, I would teach 5 classes of math a day, and the students were at all different levels, each class. So I would create content for each of those classes. So it gave me a lot of experience. Every day I'm writing an assignment based on what they had, with the feedback that I'm getting from the students.
Wow, in real time.
So just every day, feedback, new assignment, feedback, new assignment. And it was working really well. And one of the things that really was a necessary ingredient is that when I first started teaching, our gate teacher, gifted and talented coordinator in the district, said, hey, why don't we have math contests among our 6 schools that have 7th and 8th grade students? And so we created math teams, and there were 4 students on your math team, and you would compete against the top 4 students from these other 5 schools in the school district. And we won the first year, and we won the second year. And they changed the format. We won the third year, and they changed the format to make it more fair, and we won, and we just kept winning. So I think people started to realize there must be something going on at that school where with that teacher, it is really working. And I was always trying to get the kids further along. And so one day I was in our local library, and I was looking at some algebra books because I wanted to get, more content ideas for creating my own assignments. And so I left the book stacks and started walking to leave the library. And I was passing through the periodical section. And I don't know, it seemed almost like a vision. I just saw in big block letters, algebra, as I'm walking through this periodical section. And I'm overcome with curiosity. Algebra in the periodical section? So I started a search, looking all around for any magazine that might have algebra on it. And I came to a National Review magazine published by William F. Buckley. And it's the results of a field test of a new algebra book in Oklahoma City schools. So I'm fascinated. I opened up the article and I'm reading about this guy, this retired Air Force Colonel, John Saxon, who had written an algebra book. And as I'm reading through the article, I'm realizing this guy teaches math the same way I do. So it was kind of a revelation, like there's somebody else out there that teaches math the same way. Well, at that point, I had written some materials that we were using in our own school and in our school district. I was motivated to do it because my own kids were approaching 6th, 7th, 8th grade level. And I wanted them to be better prepared when they came to me so our team could be stronger, our math team could be stronger. So I had created this content, and we were using it in 2 schools. The following year, actually, we used it in every school in the school district. And so I wrote a letter to John Saxon. Well, actually, I first ordered a copy of his algebra book because I was so curious. And I started just using that book with my 8th grade students. And after several weeks, I thought, this is just fine. This makes it easy for me because it's so similar to what I've done at the other grade levels, lower grade levels. So I wrote a letter to John Saxon. Dear Colonel Saxon, I'm using your algebra book. It's working great in my classroom. It's very similar to the books that I've written at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade level. I've read in the article how much trouble you went through to get your books in print. And I wonder if you have any advice for me about how I could get my books in print. I thought he would maybe have some advice.
Right.
But instead, I didn't realize he was already writing a book to precede Algebra 1, entitled Algebra 1/2. And he was writing a book to follow Algebra 1 called Algebra 1.5, which later became Algebra 2. I think the 1.5 name just wasn't working in the marketplace. So that's how we actually first connected. We met in Long Beach. He was speaking at a conference in 1983, November of 83. And he said, I'll give you the same deal Prentice Hall gave me. You publish a book that I like and I'll put it into print. Well, we were so close together in the way we taught. It was just a simple process of reworking the materials that I've written for a book that would precede his Algebra 1/2 book, and that was Math 76. or Math 76, as some people call it. But at that time, we just called it Math 76. There was no slash between the 7 and the 6. So the early editions, Math 76. And that's how we got started.
Do you ever think, what if you didn't go to the library that day or walk by that periodical, how different your life would be?
Yeah, Karen, there are a lot of things about this that just make it feel like this has been orchestrated.
Yes.
Really pretty amazing. And just the fact that, math books or textbooks themselves, especially at the K-8 level, they're not written by individuals. They're written by development houses. So for one, a person to write a book and get it published, that's just, in fact, that's why John Saxon had to publish the book himself. He had created an Algebra 1 book. It was highly effective. It was demonstrated to be effective by field tests in Oklahoma City schools, in many, many schools. So he went to the publishers in New York and Boston and said, hey, I've got a great book for you. And they said, that's not the way we write books. We're not going to publish it. We won't. And so he knew he had created a better mousetrap. And so he just decided to publish it himself. And so he went $80,000 into debt to publish his first book. And about 20 years later, Saxon Publishers was the most valuable privately owned publishing company in the world.
And it's still going strong now. I mean,
And
we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah,
during the pandemic.
John had 4 kids that
yeah, it's very high demand online still.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Well, it's very gratifying too. Writing for my own kids, I wanted my own kids to children, to be well prepared. So it's really gratifying that so many kids across the country have been able to use and benefit from this program.
Yes. And, before we go on to some of the Saxon textbook specific questions, I'm just curious your thoughts on this. I don't know what it's like teaching today. Is there that flexibility today where teachers, if they see a problem, they could take that feedback and create their own curriculum? Or is that just not something feasible today? Do you think another outsider today could do what John Saxon did back in the day, or it's just very different today?
Well, for John Saxon, I think he picked the right book, right level, Algebra 1, because it would be possible to put that book into print and find a market for it. It's a big enough demand, an Algebra 1 book is a big enough demand, meaning there are enough students that would be using it so that you can grab a share of that market and it would finance the growth of your business. It's a lot harder at the K-8 level for a teacher to do what I did. I just had the trust of my principal. I had the trust of the district curriculum, assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. And they just let me, as long as we were getting good results, they let me create my own content. So, but it's a lot harder now with court cases, equal access to the curriculum. You need to follow the district adopted curriculum. I would find it pretty frustrating right now.